and welcome to the Intuitive Psychologist podcast. I'm Lindsay Pandya, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist who's been in the mental health field for over 15 years. I am so grateful to be part of the mental health field, especially since in this day and age, mental health is really coming online as to how important it is to not only have it, but to have the conversations and normalize what many of us all go through. We all, from time to time, and sometimes for far too long, struggle with our mental health. The one piece, though, about mental health that I feel is missing so much is the conversation around spirituality and how important it can be to be tapped into the spiritual side of you to help with your mental health. Thankfully, I feel like in this current climate, people are having a spiritual awakening at an ever-increasing rate, which can be jarring and scary and confusing, and you may even think that you're losing your mind a bit. So my intention with this podcast is to bridge the gap between spirituality and mental health, and I want to bridge the gap through normalizing not only mental illness, mental health issues, but to also normalize typical spiritual awakening symptoms, give you some guidance as to how to manage a spiritual awakening. I bring on guests to help talk about different modalities to connect you in to your spiritual nature. And I want to do all of this with the intention to help you grow and to know that you are not alone and that there's help out there for you. So please join me on this journey through my own self-discovery with mental health problems, with challenging life events, and going through my spiritual awakening and continued spiritual growth. Join me and my friends as we have these interesting and sometimes very difficult conversations, not only about mental health, but also about a spiritual journey. So welcome, friends, and enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Intuitive Psychologist podcast. So I wanted to give you all a little insight into my internal workings, I guess, for the last, 3 or 4 weeks now. I've been dealing with some stuff, and I've been working a lot with my shaman, and I have been really stepping in to my shamanic practices and making them pretty much a daily ritual and making my shamanic work deeper and deeper. And the problem with that has been that part of this process has been some deep inner work. Inner work where I have had to come to terms with fears and doubts and not knowing what's the next big phase and how to really work all this information into not only my internal healing process, but my healing work to help others. And it's just been exciting and rough and more excitement, I guess. I want to do today's episode starting the conversation about stepping into your interpersonal power. And I've been called to this myself recently, and I feel that so many of my clients right now are also being called to step into their personal power, and I think that as a nation, we too are being called into our personal power, because power has felt removed from us as a nation, stepped on and trampled by people in our inner circles, but also in our society. And so the beginning piece of this conversation that I want to have with you right now is our fears around power. Because at least for me, and I think for many of us, and maybe this is more of a feminine thing than it is a masculine thing. And again, remember that when I say feminine versus masculine, sometimes, yes, I talk about the gender of female, the sexuality sometimes of female, but moreover, the feminine energy. And so, for some women in our society, we have been told that we don't have power. I think especially true for certain cultures over others. You know, we have matriarchal societies and cultures where the female is the head of the household. She is the one that calls the shots and is the go-to person for much of what happens in that family. And then we have very patriarchal societies and cultures. And our United States is a patriarchal society where we have legitimately men that have been running this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we have actually removed power from so many powerful societies along the way. Beginning when the white man came over to the United States and exerted the white man's will over the Native Americans of this country. And it is a beautiful time to really be talking about this, because we're only a week away from Thanksgiving, which is a traditional holiday in the United States, where we give a false history or a shaded history where we say that white man and Native Americans come together sharing food, sharing thanks, and working together. But the reality is that this whole month of November is dedicated to the Native Americans, because this land is the one that white man has taken over. We have colonized and removed Native American history, Native American voice, Native American culture, Native American practices, and most importantly, the Native American spirit from this land. And so when we think about the birth of this United States of America, this is where power really is exerted over others. And I believe that this is where this concept that power is to be feared sort of originates. Because there's two types of power, really. The power where we exert our will onto others and make them do what we want them to do, or force them to do things that they don't want to do, that they don't choose to do, to serve our needs. And then there is an internal power, one that's cultivated from within and one that does not remove power from others, only amplifies the powers of those around us, because we do not need power from another for us to feel good, whole, and safe. This information actually comes directly from within, and we exude it out as an invitation for others to stand in their own personal power. So at least for this part of the conversation, I want to talk about our misconceptions around power and my own personal experiences with this and my journey. Now, I'm not to say that I step in my personal power all the time, that I've mastered this, but this is a calling that I have had within the last month or so. So obviously, brand new to me, considering the majority of my life I have felt relatively powerless, with moments of feeling powerful within my own skin. So for me, when I think of the word, and I want to invite you all for a moment to sit here and think, what are the adjectives that you would use to describe the kind of power that you fear? Because I have always feared my own power. And the reason I've always feared my own power is because the power of others has consistently been exerted upon me. I didn't learn from an early age what it meant to find my own power from within and to stand in that internal power with grace and humility and beauty, really. So for me, I think of this one experiment that we had in my doctorate level training and education, and I don't remember the course, but it was probably something to do with cultural competence or something to that effect. And the professor had either thrown candy up into the air or dropped it to the ground and told us, either it was dropped on the ground and we were told, on the count of 3, grab as much candy as you can or whatever, or threw it up in the air and then we were supposed to grab as much as we could. I was the only person in the class that just used my arm in a sweeping motion on the ground and just got a shit ton of candy that I just scraped right up to me. I mean, I got the bulk of the candy because I wasn't picking up one little piece at a time. I was actually, in my mind, working smarter than harder and just did it. So in that moment, I won. And instantly I felt like shit. One of 2 reasons. One, I know that as a white person, that has been my lineage. I don't know specifically for my family if we had slaves or if we have been on the wrong side of history, genetically speaking, and ancestrally speaking, for hundreds of years or not. I just don't know. All I know is a couple of generations back. I do know that my father had at least one black person that worked for him. I don't know if she got paid or not. Did she get treated well or not? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's all I do know is that what I've seen from my family and from, what I've seen in my area is that I probably wouldn't be too proud of the things that my ancestors may have done over the years. But no matter what my family did or didn't do, the skin that I'm in and the ancestors that I am genetically linked to, we have done horrible things where we took from the land, we took from the people. And then what did we do with it? And was it our right that just because we took it and we could be fair and equitable in our mind? Because that was the thought I had. Well, I will divvy it up equally amongst all of us, right? Was it mine to take in the beginning? Right? Was it mine to take in the beginning? And was my belief of what I thought was equitable and fair, was that true? Right? Was that actually real? That it was the most fair and most equitable way for the group of us to share this? And to be fair, it wasn't even told I had to share, but in my heart, it was not that I wanted more than others. In my heart, I just wanted to win in that moment and to be smart in that moment. And by doing so, the playing field was not level, and the power was in my hand. The power was in my hand to do what was right or not. And again, just because it's what I think is right, I would say that in every moment, we all are doing what we think is right. So, who am I to say? But I had so much shame in that moment because I held all the power in that moment, and I hated that. Because to me, up until recently, and I want to say months, is when I have started to try to shift my belief about power. Up until just recently in this year, I have been terrified of power. Fearful that I will hurt people because I have power. And so that has prevented me in so many ways to do anything. Yeah, what I've seen is the word power means overpower, not power is neutral. Overpower is too much power. And underpower is, not enough of it. So, I always associated the word power with exerting and hurting. Exerting control and hurting others. Because that was the only way I saw power be really expressed. Granted, there are moments in my life where I have felt powerful. But as you all know, you've heard, I believe, episode 7, Spirituality is Not All Love and Light, that my childhood was quite challenging. I didn't feel that I was safe to have a voice in my family. I didn't feel that I was safe in my own body. I not only witnessed intimidation and aggression, but I could energetically feel it too. That there were times where, after my parents' divorce, and there were a couple of times where I did spend alone time with my dad, I went right back into that powerless mode. I remember being at Pizza Hut, having a meal with him, and I believe physically you could see me curl up into a ball in the booth across from him, protecting myself, terrified, absolutely powerless. I didn't have a say about whether or not I would spend time with him, because if I did, I would not have. The sad thing is even as I remember this moment, I sort of watch it as if I'm in a movie or watching a movie. And as the objective observer of this moment, I can feel the sadness in my dad's heart that his daughter did not want to be around him, and in fact was so terrified or disgusted by him that it made him feel like a monster. I can only imagine what his experience was like going home after trying to connect back in with me and me utterly pushing him away. And I see the little Lindsay balled up, wanting to cry, feeling that her entire life, her power and her voice, her capabilities have been robbed, stolen, removed, siphoned away by this man who was downright powerless himself. And to counteract the powerlessness that he felt, he exerted his will onto all of us, scaring us in different ways. For me, I felt very physically unsafe in so many ways, and emotionally unsafe almost always. The only time I truly felt safe and powerful as a child was when I was in nature, alone. Those were my moments of power and safety and serenity. But that little girl was frightened all the time. All the time, feeling as if she was never good enough. No matter what she ever did, it was never enough. And fearing what I would do or what somebody else in my household would do to frighten or piss off the angry bear who was just waiting to go off. Ugh. So as a person outside of this that is no longer in that dynamic, I feel for both of these people. It was a misalignment of desires and behaviors. Obviously, I wanted to have a loving relationship with my father. I wanted to have the father that I had always wanted, the kind of father that I see my husband be with his children. And after so long, I just completely shut it off because it was too painful. That was my only power I had in that moment. In many moments in that house was to just shut it off, keep to myself, because that was the only safe thing to do. Then I also think, going outside of my personal childhood, but when we think of politicians, let's just think about this last 4 years. How many Americans have felt powerless And how many Americans have felt more powerful, and why? Regardless of what you think about Trump, these last 4 years have divided our nation, completely divided it. In my lifetime, I don't remember a time that two groups of people, literally almost 50% of the population, completely divided and polarized on either ends of the spectrum. Now, I'm very aware of the Civil War, and I'm not saying that this is the exact same time repeated, nor can I speak to the generations prior to me in between the Civil War and this current state of affairs in the United States, but so many ways in which power was starting to be gained to the people. It felt that in the last 4 years, power was being slowly or very quickly actually, removed from so many people that have not been in a place of power. So specifically with gay rights, the fear was with the Supreme Court justice being stacked, predominantly with conservative judges, that the right for everyone in this country to marry whomever they want to, the fear was that would be removed. Female rights, that has been another big fear, is that that reproductive rights would be removed. We have seen inching back of so many things related to female rights. So the fear was that big decisions would be removed. Environmental issues have been taking several steps back, including Native American land with the pipelines, rolling back of progressive ways of dealing with our emissions, all of these different areas. We see little to no progress with Black Americans' rights to just be Black in America. So many people have been killed and have been killed, God, since they were brought over to this country. The fact that Black athletes can't simply kneel at a football game, that has to be polarized. So, in so many ways, politics is about disempowerment. Whether it's restricting people from the right to vote, easy access to vote. We think of poor Americans as well, and how they and their voices are continuously silenced. I mean, so many ways in which politics alone removes our power. So many people, whether it was this election or all the elections prior, have said, what's the point of voting? My vote doesn't count anyway. Just powerlessness. Because at the end of the day, oftentimes the entire system seems completely rigged to help the top percent in corporations, not the people. Now let's think about our education system and powerlessness that children feel in our education system. Some teachers are magnificent, wonderful, empower children to be themselves, to speak their minds, to explore new concepts, to fail and still be loved and supported. There are so many wonderful teachers out there that do these beautiful things. And yet there are so many teachers that disempower our youth, disempower the adults that are going to college at varying levels. Teachers are an authority figure, and in an authority figure, we automatically ascribe power to them. And we say that because you hold this position, just like a police officer or a firefighter, politicians, teachers, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, all these positions, people that wear uniforms, uniform is a power piece. In the military, all of these professions we have ascribed automatic power to, whether consciously or unconsciously. We see them as authority. And when we see authority, we assume that they know better than we do, that they are wiser than we are, and that they have everyone's best interest in mind. Let's lump bosses into this category as well. There are plenty of wonderful bosses, plenty of wonderful police officers, plenty of wonderful military, plenty of wonderful politicians even, that are really trying to do the right thing, the good thing by all. But when we think of when power goes bad, we think of bosses who are corruptible or remove our power. It's really damaging. And these bad examples of when authority figures are harmful to us individually, collectively. And if we have enough bad examples, especially early in life, we begin to associate power with these people or with these examples of when power has gone astray. I think of the numerous bosses, supervisors that I've had in my entire life. And I would get so frustrated because very few of the times I found people that I could look up to truly and say, they may not be perfect, but they do a really good job. Far too often I have come across people that are in a position of power and they have no respect for me. I worked under one psychologist who was completely unethical. This person, I did testing for them, and so I would give the tests to the clients, write the report, and they would review my report to make sure it looked good, sounded good, made sense, was equivalent to the scores that were provided. They would add in the interview that they had with the client and then sign off on it. And I had a client pop up that had elevated scores in areas that were concerning. So I brought this to the psychologist's attention, and their reaction was telling me to change the scores and said, oh, no. let me see what the questions are, because I did hand scoring. What are the questions for the elevated areas? And we pulled it out, and she looked at this person looked at the questions and said, oh, no. I interviewed them. That's not what they meant. 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 Change these. And I said, nope. I said, no, I will not. I will not change the scores, because it's unethical to change scores for a test. What the client puts down is what the client puts down. Now you can go in and you can utilize the interview to give context, maybe, but you are never, ever, ever allowed to change answers on a test for your own client, so that all of a sudden now their scores are normal. And I said, no, I wouldn't do it. Now, granted, this was not the only unethical thing that this person had done. This person used me and her staff as her personal assistants for things, that wasn't our job, that wasn't our role. Didn't pay us, and actively blocked us from earning income. The guise for working for her was, you do work, you get your hours, you do this extra work, you get paid, and then every time that was attempted to get this work so that, earn some income, nope. But this person also yelled at her staff, berated them, belittled them. And my last straw was after they tried to get me to change the test scores, and I didn't. But right after that, she had threatened one of her staff and said that she would throw her out the window, and we were on a very tall building. And so I put my foot down and said, absolutely not, I'm not doing this anymore, not even if I were to stick it out for 3 more months, I could be done with my requirements and be able to move on. I still said no. And it was a hard decision to make, because the easy thing to do would just be shut the hell up, go with the flow for the next 2 to 3 months, be done, never have to see her again. And I chose to take a stand. And I'm glad that what I ended up doing was pulling her to the side, letting her know that that was my last day, right after all this had happened, like literally right, like the next time I was supposed to be in the office. I want to say like a week to think about it before I had to be back in the office again. And I said, I need to speak to you and tell you that I will not be working here any longer, and I need to tell you why. And I told her about those 2 main things. And she had excuses for both. And I told her that that's unexcusable, period. That ethics is very clear. There's no gray, and this one is black and white. You do not change test scores, and that she harasses her staff, and that's not acceptable. And I was terrified. I felt powerless until the conversation was over and I walked away. And I gave that coworker a hug and said, that I wished her well, but that I couldn't stand by and do that anymore. And that I had hoped that she would find a way out and no longer be there either, that she didn't deserve that. And in that moment, yes, that's probably when I did feel powerful, because it was done, it was over with. I had presented myself well, I had stood up for myself, spoken out for what I believed in, and wasn't just going to take the easy way out. And similar, another bad role model, let's say, was when I was sexually harassed at another place that I was collecting my experience for my graduate degree. And my non-clinical supervisor had invited me to have lunch during a workday. Subway, nothing exciting. Didn't think too much of it, but wanted to talk to me about the program, his vision, how he was hoping for my help, all that stuff. And we had been working together, I want to say, for maybe a few months or so. And very long story short, pretty much told me that he was attracted to me, was married, didn't want to cheat on his wife and wouldn't, but wanted me to help him get over his attraction to me. And he needed me to do it because, I'm a psychologist, or preparing to be a psychologist, and, he needed this help. Now, this person knew what the fuck they were doing. He was able to tell that what my weakness is wanting to be helpful, wanting to feel smart, wanting to be good at what I do. So he played into it. I need you. No one else can do this but you. I need your help to be better. Okay. I'll take on the challenge. You already know you and I aren't going to do shit. I'm cool with that. And so I allowed him to text me, and rarely it would be about work, mostly it would be about how he was attracted to me and wanted me and so glad that we wouldn't do anything together and blah, blah, blah. And it felt uncomfortable, but I felt like, well, this is what I do to help, right? Somebody's in need, they ask for help, I help. God, I was so naive. But anyway, months go by, and he tries to escalate things, and very subtly, right? There's this new project. He only needs 2 people. I'm one of the 2 that he's selecting. Of course, it's another attractive female, and, we might need to travel. We have all these extra things to talk about, and I at least knew that I would not be putting myself in any sort of situation. So when he wanted to meet, he was never invited to my home. It was always in public places, and as things were escalating, and I was really feeling this icky feeling, like, something just doesn't feel right about this. I was feeling powerless is what I was feeling, because I couldn't get away. I didn't want to have these conversations with him. I never really did to begin with, but I just felt like, well, that's what you do when somebody asks you for help. You say yes. And so I did for too long. And as he was trying to escalate things and I was not falling for it and willing to have an extramarital relationship with him, he all of a sudden turned on me very quickly. Because I guess all of his efforts just didn't pay off. And he was sick and tired of playing this with me. And so when the switch flipped for him, it flipped bad. And he berated me. He talked down to me. He told me it was all my fault for all this bullshit stuff, like me coming in to work early for free. I was working for free the whole time. And I would come in early so that I could prep for the day and be prepared so that when my first client came in, I was ready to go. And he would yell at me about, why am I showing up early? It makes him look bad. I'm like, how does none of this make sense? And he was sitting above me. So I was sitting at a desk and he sat on top of the desk. And he was right in my space, and he was using intimidation and manipulation. And he made me cry, and I hated that I was crying, but I felt trapped in that, physically trapped, emotionally trapped, confused, angry, powerless. I felt so powerless in that moment. What I had realized was, in all these weeks leading up to this moment where he's towering over me, I was actually getting re-triggered into some PTSD symptoms from other instances you all have heard about in the other episode. And I was drinking more and sleeping less, irritable, like all classic sort of re-triggering of PTSD stuff. And talked to some girlfriends from school and told them what had happened, and they helped to build my power to say, oh, hell no, that shit ain't cool. You need to go tell our professor. And so I did. And I contacted one of our professors, and they immediately pulled me from the site. But I was scared to see him because I was moving to a different location of the same type of work. And so I was hopeful to never see him again because I felt so powerless compared to him and all the weight he was able to pull. And it was so scary to me to think that he could have that power over me. Obviously, with my ex-husband, I felt powerless all the time. And not just physically, but when we would argue, when he would get mad at me, when I would describe to him how I was feeling or what I needed or any of that stuff, it was just that wall of like, yeah, I don't care. And so continuous feelings of powerlessness with that. And it was just really hard to get over these moments. Now, I want to close today out and pose a couple of questions to you to think about when it comes to this overpowering sense of power. What has power meant for you? And it doesn't all have to be bad. Some of it can be good. So what are all the words that you associate with power? Write these things down as writing exercises if you'd like, or just take these moments, maybe hit pause and answer them in your head. But I find far more power in writing than in just thinking in our head, because it helps it to come out from our head when it goes down onto paper. When in your life have you felt powerless? Are there certain situations more than others that make you feel powerless? Patterns that you've noticed when you feel powerless? What does your body feel like when you feel powerless? Are there certain types of people or relationships that can make you feel powerless? And what are things that you notice about yourself, behaviors, emotions, thoughts, when you're feeling powerless? Like for me, I feel small. Oftentimes I feel powerless when my boundaries are crossed, or when I don't realize that I can stand up and say something. Like I need somebody else to say, yeah, Lindsay, it's okay. what you're feeling is correct. You're not over-exaggerating. You're not, over-representing or doing any of that. I need some sort of external, check-in to say, yeah, you're okay. That's not fully powerful to require others to let me know that it's okay to have my experience. But yeah, I feel that sense of anger, that pit and fire in my stomach. But then I'll sink in. My shoulders will hunch over. My body will cave in. I will begin to take the fetal position. And I think I'm not allowed to feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't do these things. So ask yourself those questions so that you can begin to tap in to your own interpretations of power. And when we meet again next time, I'm going to talk about what power actually is as it relates to this internal state, and how do we access that internal state of power. All right. Thank you all so much for listening again. And if any of this has triggered you in any way, please do something in this moment to self-soothe, to do some self-care, do something that's going to help you feel like you can tap back into that internal power. Even if you only have a slight idea as to what that means, or you fully understand and can grasp your internal sense of power, please take care of yourself. I love you all so much, and have a good night. Bye. Have you heard about Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's the way I'm making my podcast right now. And it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And Anchor is going to distribute your podcast to all the major important places you would ever want, like Spotify and Apple and so many more places. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. I love it. It's so simple. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you all so much for listening to this podcast. It really means the world to me. And if you find this information and content useful, please go rate and review the podcast and share it with anyone that you think might also benefit from this content. On Instagram, my handle is theintuitivepsychologist111, all underscore. And on there you will see I've got inspirational messages to share. And on Wednesdays at 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, I will go on and either do a live guided meditation or present a specific topic ahead of time. You can submit your questions and I will answer them live along with any questions that you have on the live chat. So that's been a really fun place to get a lot of interaction from my listeners and followers. If you've got any questions, comments, concerns, topic ideas, guests you'd like to return, please feel free to email me. My email is intuitive.psych.111@gmail.com. So that is intuitive.psych, which is spelled psych.111@gmail.com. If you're looking to work with me and you would like to have some assistance during the early stages of a spiritual awakening or any sort of early stages of coming into your spirituality, please feel free to look at my website. My website is intuitivepsych.com, intuitivepsych.com. and you can book a free 30-minute consultation to let me know what you're looking for and make sure that I am the best person to help you out. If you're in California and you're looking for spiritual therapy, feel free to also email me at the same email, intuitive.psych.111@gmail.com. And again, you will get a free 30-minute consultation to see if your mental health needs and my services are a good fit. So, again, thank you all so much for your support, your interactions, and just moving the conversation forward and continuing to give back in any way that you can. Not just for me, but just for everybody out there. Don't forget, folks, you are the light.